Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this very interesting theatrical seminar. And I'm very happy to see many of the theater enthusiasts over here. Uh, on behalf of AMA, I would like to welcome both of them on our stage. And first of that, I would like to introduce Vijay Bhai. Of course, many of us know him since many years, but those who have come for the first time, I would like to read out very quickly his very rich biography. Shri Vijay Padki is a theatre educator based in Bangalore. He has won two caps, though none of them today, for most of his life with equal facility. He has been active in the theatre for 60 years. He has been a management professional for over 45 years. So he is a psychologist and behavioral scientist by training and founder director of the PNP Group, a management resource center that has programs of research, consulting, and training in the areas of organization and institutional development. A good part of the work of the PNP Group is devoted to the effectiveness of large development programs. Among his earlier assignments, he added the Human Resources Division of India's oldest cooperative R&D institution, that is ATIRA, which also helped set up the first Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. Later, he was a member of the founding faculty at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, the founder of a Center for Management for the Textile Industry in Ahmedabad, and a visiting professor at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, to initiate a program in R&D management. He was a senior associate at National Institute of Advanced Studies in its early years. The International Association of Applied Psychology elected him as a fellow for his lifetime contribution to research and practice. Mr. Padki joined Bangalore Little Theatre in 1960, the year of its inception, and later served the company in many capacities as actor, director, trainer, writer, designer, and administrator, including stint secretary and president. In 2008, the institutional setup was restructured. Bangalore Little Theatre Foundation was created as a public charitable trust. It was done with the purpose of reinforcing the organization's strength in outreach activity and thus rededicating the commitment to social development goals beyond performance. The trust requested Vijay Bhai to provide the leadership to a newly created Academy of Theatre Arts in its formative years. The Academy is developing a long-term program thrust to strengthen the institution of theatre education and practice in India. He has been responsible for institutionalizing several activities of Bangalore Little Theatre, such as the annual summer workshop for newcomers to the theatre, from which has emerged a large number of the theatre personalities in Bangalore. The History of Ideas program of biographical plays, the Courtyard Theatre program, and the Children's Theatre program, which includes the annual flagship children's play as a partnership production to support a charity. He received and initiated the highly successful trainer training program and the director's training program in Bangalore. He has forged several international partnerships with BLT over the years. The John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in Washington invited him to serve as an advisor to the India Festival in 2011. The same year, he gave the Harold Clurman Lecture at the Stella Adler Studio in New York. More recently, the Ministry of Culture invited him to initiate a program of arts and heritage management in India. Mr. Padki has written over 50 original plays. He has also adapted or translated several play scripts. Seagull Books has published a volume of 2 Gujarati plays translated by him. In 1993, he won the award for the best contemporary play script instituted by The Hindu for the play credit titles. Bangalore Little Theatre is now publishing all his plays over about 10 volumes. The first 3 volumes were released recently in December 2019. With such a rich background, he is here with us AMA is very, very privileged, and I would like to present a bouquet of flowers as
Allow me to introduce Professor Ajit from the Indian Institute of Management. Apart from his academic duties, he has taken great interest in the arts, and he was a very early reader of the play script, which is the original of what I'm going to do today. So he's familiar with the topic, and he's familiar with the actual drama, and he agreed to serve as a moderator at the end of the talk. So he will begin with a conversation with the writer, and then open it up for a Q&A with anybody who's interested. Professor Mathur. I think we can begin. We'll sit down. We'll do that later on.
Thank you, sir. You don't want the mic, right?
I'm going to desert the stage and do this session from the floor, but I want to check before I begin if I'm visible. All rows? Is it all right? One very simple reason that I prefer to do it from here rather than up there is that what we are doing is not conventional drama. It falls in the category of documentary theater and storytelling theater. And storytelling is best done at spitting distance. So the closer you come to the spitter, the better. I would urge the people at the back to come and occupy the front rows, please. Come in, come as close as possible. Please come forward. Yeah, there's still some seats here. There are no VIPs today. Please occupy the front rows. Please. Right, I think we're ready to begin. With your permission, we can start. As the announcement mentions, what we're doing today is a one-person presentation of a play that has had enormous success over the last few years. We are touching 110 performances. The play has 3 actors. It has traveled all over India and abroad and continues to be in demand. And let's see how it goes today. If this fires your imagination and curiosity, maybe we'll bring the full play here one day. Many thanks to AMA, Mr. Nair in particular, who took personal interest. Many thanks to AMA for arranging this evening. I've had a very, very long association with AMA. So it's nice to be back here. Nice to be back to Ahmedabad, which is my in-law territory, and also to AMA. All right. January 30, 1948. 3 bullets were fired at point-blank range. 2 words were heard when the lifeless body collapsed on the lawns of Birla House in New Delhi. Hey Ram. This was the tragic end for the illustrious son of India, the one who had done more than all else put together to free India from the shackles of British subjugation. Another illustrious son of India, who had done more than all else to gain recognition for India on the intellectual stage of the world, had ended his conscious moments by dictating these words. Oh, deceitful one, in simple life you have craftily scattered the snares of false faith. One who endures your deception without effort is rewarded by you with the right to eternal peace. In their last moments, one remembered God with reverence, the other called his God deceitful, and staked his claim on eternal peace as reward from his deceitful muse. To start with, we find one from a western corner of India, Gujarat, and the other from across the subcontinent in the east, Bengal. One called the other Mahatma, and the other addressed the first as Gurudev. They admired and revered each other as few friends do. They differed with each other as few adversaries do. In the year 1901, Tagore was 40 years old, and Gandhi was 32. Neither had attained a stature that extended much beyond their primary spheres of activity. That was Bengali literature for Tagore. For Gandhi, it was representing the oppressed British Indians in South Africa. In December 1913, 2 friends of Tagore, Charlie Andrews and Willie Pearson, left for South Africa to advance the cause of Gandhi there. When Gandhi decided to disband the Phoenix Ashram in South Africa and return to India, it was Charlie Andrews who suggested that the residents of Phoenix Ashram stay at Gurudev's Shantiniketan before Gandhi could make alternate arrangements for them. The boys from Phoenix Ashram arrived at Shantiniketan in November 1914. Soon after their arrival, Tagore observed, the Phoenix boys have discipline where they should have ideals. They're trained to obey. For obedience is good, not because it is good in itself, but because it's a sacrifice. These boys are in danger of forgetting to wish for anything, and wishing is the best part of attainment. However, a few days later, I wrote to Mahatma Ji, "Dear Mr. Gandhi, I write this letter to thank you for allowing your boys to become our boys as well, and thus forming a living link in the sadhana of both our lives. Very sincerely yours." As early as 1918, Gandhi wanted Hindi to be the national language. Dear Gurudev, Is not Hindi the only possible national language for interprovincial intercourse and for all other national proceedings? Should not Hindi be the language principally used at the forthcoming Congress? I feel that if we are to touch the masses, and if national servants are to come in contact with the masses all over India, the above questions ought to be treated of the utmost urgency. I am yours sincerely. Dear Mr. Gandhi, of course, Hindi is a possible national language for interprovincial intercourse in India. But about its introduction in the Congress, I think we cannot afford to enforce it for a long time to come. It is truly a foreign language for the Madras people. Most of the politicians will find it difficult to express themselves adequately in that language. So Hindi will have to remain optional in our national proceedings. Yours very sincerely. The strain of differences had started to tell. Agreement on the malady, disagreement on the remedy, accord on the ends, discord on the means. Gandhi had advocated boycott of British educational institutions. He had prescribed satyagraha, charkha, Swaraj as the trident of his freedom movement. Tagore objected to each one of these. Either in letters to friends or in articles published, Gandhi defended his position firmly through the same media. The debate between them was on political issues, but was elevated to a philosophical plane. Dear Mahatma ji, passive resistance is a force which is not necessarily moral in itself. It can be used against truth as well as for it. The danger inherent in all force grows stronger when it is likely to gain success. For then it becomes temptation. I know your teaching is to fight against evil by the help of the good. But such a fight is for heroes, not for men led by impulses of the moment. Yours, etc. 2 years later, he wrote in an article, Brahma Vidya in India has for its object mukti, emancipation, while Buddhism has nirvana, extinction. It may be argued that both sides have the same idea by different names, but names represent attitudes of mind, emphasize particular aspects of truth. Mukti draws our attention to the positive, nirvana to the negative side of things. In my humble opinion, rejection is as much an ideal as the acceptance of a thing. It is as necessary to reject untruth as it is to accept truth. All religions teach that two opposite forces act upon us, and that the human endeavor consists of a series of eternal rejections and acceptances. Non-cooperation with evil is as much a duty as cooperation with good. The poet has come to the conclusion that non-cooperation is not dignified enough for the India of his vision, that it is a doctrine of negation and despair, separation, narrowness. I shall endeavor in all humility to answer the poet's doubts. I may fail to convince him or the reader who may have been touched by his eloquence, but I'd like to assure him and India that non-cooperation in conception is not any of the things he fears. And he need have no cause to be ashamed of his country for having adopted non-cooperation. Non-cooperation may have come in advance of its time. The world must then wait. Tagore was not to be silenced. I shall endeavor in all humility to answer I'm back to Gandhi. The poet has come to the conclusion that having adopted non-cooperation is a flaw. I shall endeavor to change his opinion on this. I do not say for a moment that we should belittle the work immediately to hand. But when the bird is aroused by the dawn, its awakening is not absorbed altogether in its search for food. Its wings respond unwearily to the call of the sky. Its throat pours forth songs, the joy of the new light. Universal humanity has sent us its call today. We must respond. Response is the only true sign of life. True to his poetic instinct, the poet lives for the morrow and would have us do likewise. He presents to our admiring gaze the beautiful picture of the birds early in the morning singing hymns of praise as they soar into the sky. These birds had their day's food and soared with rested wings, in whose veins new blood streamed through the previous night. But I have had the pain of watching birds who, for want of strength, could not be coaxed even to their wings. The human bird under the Indian sky gets up weaker than when he pretended to retire. For millions, it is an eternal vigil or an eternal trance. The hungry millions ask for one poem, invigorating food. It cannot be given to them. They must earn it, and they can earn it only by the sweat of their brow. If we take care of today, God will take care of tomorrow. And so on. They used images for arguments and played upon each other's images to press home a point. This went on for 4 years. Tagore commented, "What irony of fate is this, that I should be preaching cooperation of cultures between East and West on one side of the ocean, while the doctrine of non-cooperation is preached on the other side. I do not believe in the material civilization of the West, just as I do not believe in the physical body to be the highest truth in man. But I still believe in the true meeting of the East and the West. I hope I'm as great a believer in free air as the great poet. I do not want my house to be walled on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the cultures of all the lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, but I refuse to be blown off by my feet by any. Tagore acknowledged readily the loftiness of the Mahatma's point of view, as well as the principled position taken. He wrote, previously, the vision of our political leaders had never reached beyond the English-knowing classes, because the country was meant for them only that bookish aspect of it which is to be found in the Englishman's history. Here is the truth at last. Not a mere quotation out of a book. So the name of Mahatma given to him is his true name. Who else has felt so many men of India to be his own flesh and blood? But his own point of view also merited attention. But the sight that meets my eyes is, on the one hand, people immensely busy, on the other hand, intensely afraid. What I hear on every side is that reason and culture must be closured. It is only necessary to cling to an unquestioning obedience. Obedience to whom? To some mantra, some unreasoned creed. The Bard of Santiniketan, in a brilliant essay on the present movement, presents a series of word pictures in which he alone can paint. It is an eloquent protest against authority, slave mentality, or whatever description one gives of blind acceptance of a passing mania, whether out of fear or hope. The poet tells us summarily to reject anything does not appeal to our senses, to our reason. I'm quite conscious of the fact that blind surrender to love is more often mischievous than a forced surrender to the lash of the tyrant. There is hope for the slave of the brute, none for that of love. But whilst I agree with all that the poet has said as of the necessity of watchfulness, lest we think, I must not be understood to endorse the proposition that there is any such blind obedience on a large scale in the country today. From our master, the Mahatma, we must learn the truth of love in all its purity. But the science and art of building up Swaraj is a vast subject. For this task, there must be aspiration and emotion. But no less must study and thought be there likewise. For that, the economist must think, the mechanic must labor, the educationist and statesman must teach and contrive. In a word, the mind of the country must exert itself in all directions. Above all, the spirit of inquiry throughout the whole country must be kept intact and untrammeled. Its mind not made timid or inactive by compulsion, open or secret. God has given Mahatma the voice that can call, for in him there is truth. Why should this not be a long-awaited opportunity? But his call isn't one narrow field alone. To one and all, he simply says, spin and weave, spin and weave. Is this the new call? In the new age of creation? Gandhi's reply was not unexpected. I must confess that I do not draw a sharp or any distinction between economics and ethics. Economics that hurt the moral well-being of an individual or a nation are immoral and therefore sinful. Thus, the economics that permit one country to prey upon another are immoral. It is sinful for me to wear the latest finery of Regent Street when I know that if I had worn the things woven by my neighboring spinners and weavers, that would have clothed me and fed and clothed them. On the knowledge of my sin bursting upon me, I must consign the foreign garments to the flames and thus purify myself. And henceforth rest content with the rough khadi made by my neighbors. Charlie Andrews, a friend of both, was worried. Would such differences drive the noble souls apart? Taking a cautious step, he arranged a meeting between them in Tagore's ancestral home at Jurashako in Kolkata. Only the three of them were present, and neither Tagore nor Gandhi issued any statements to the press. Many years later, Tagore narrated the happenings at that meeting to Leonard Elmhurst, his secretary and biographer. Gandhiji came to visit me at my home in Jurashako. He wanted very much to win my support for one or another of the various planks of his political program. Gurudev, you were yourself a leader and promoter of the Swadeshi movement in India over 20 years ago. You always wanted Indians to stand on their own feet as Indians and not try to be poor copies of Englishmen. My Swaraj movement is the natural child of your Swadeshi. You should join me and strengthen it. Through the movement, we have already achieved Hindu-Muslim unity, Gurudev. I do not agree. You have introduced it only on the political platform where Hindu and Muslim happily hold whip together to crack it at the British. I have never had any love for British officialdom, but can you really say you have a genuine friendship with the Muslim deep in your hearts? When the British either walk out or are driven out, what will happen then? Only by educating their children together for 2 or 3 generations can you eventually overcome the hostility that exists between Hindu and Muslim. The whole movement is based on the principle of non-violence, Gurudev. And that is why, as a poet who believes in peace, you can enter my movement and work for it. Come here, Gandhiji. Come and look over the edge of this balcony. Look down there and see what your non-violent followers are up to. They've stolen cloth from the shops on Chitpur Road. They've lit that bonfire in my courtyard and are now howling around it like a pack of demented jackals. Is that non-violence? I see. If you cannot do much for us, may I ask for a simple service? You can at least put the young Bhadralok with their Calcutta degrees to shame by getting them all down to sit down and spin. You can lead the whole nation by spinning yourself. Poems I can spin, songs I can spin, but what a mess I would make, Gandhiji, of your precious cotton. A brief and diplomatic statement was issued by Andrews. They had a difference of temperament so wide that it was extremely difficult to arrive at a common intellectual understanding, though the moral ties of friendship remained entirely unbroken. Tagore's skepticism of Gandhi's simplistic reliance on the charkha remained. He commented, "Our country is a land of rites and ceremonies, so that we have more faith in worshipping the feet of the priest in a temple than the divinity whom the priest serves. Only to such a country can come the charkha as the emblems of our deliverance. And the people, dazed into obedience by some specious temptation, go on turning the charkha in the seclusion of their corners, dreaming all the while that the car of Swaraj itself rolls onwards in triumphal progress at every turn of their wheel. How often has my personal feeling of regard strongly urged me to accept at Mahatma Gandhi's hands my enlistment as a follower of the charkha. But as often has my reason and conscience restrained me, lest I should be a party to the raising of the charkha to a higher plane than it is due, thereby distracting attention from other more important factors in our task." Gandhi's response: "When Sir Rabindranath's criticism of the charkha was published some time ago, several friends asked me to reply to it. His criticism has not displeased me. Why should mere disagreement with my views displease? On the contrary, frank criticism pleases me, for our friendship becomes all the richer for our disagreements." While the debate raged, Gandhi's reference to Tagore as Sir stirred up a hornet's nest. Following the traumatic massacre of innocents in the Jallianwala Bagh episode, 7 years earlier, the poet had asked the viceroy to relieve him of the title. Many tongues wagged, and there were many loud whispers, as it was taken as sarcasm not befitting the Mahatma. January 18, 1930. The two met in Ahmedabad at Sabarmati Ashram. They had an animated discussion on various topics. Tagore had a cold. The signs of strain, exhaustion, and old age were quite visible on his countenance. "I'm 70 now, Mahatma Ji, and so I'm considerably older than you. But when an old wanderer of 60 can barely walk, A young poet of 70 can dance. By then, his famous dance drama, Falguni, had, got to be known all over. Allow me to ask, what are your specific plans for the country? If you make the announcement that we shall seek complete freedom, and if you do not have a program to offer, would it not destroy our credibility? I am thinking furiously about it, night and day. I do not see any sign of light in the surrounding darkness. But even if we cannot think of an effective program, we could not possibly hesitate to declare the country's objective, which can only mean full independence. The dominion status means what we have never understood it to mean. We must know that we have not lost our country. At present, it is an illusion to believe that the country is ours. Let us begin with that confidence and with a firm belief that to own our country is our right. When I left for America, I had hoped that you would create a complete service-oriented organization of our own country, where everyone can contribute according to their capacity. If you can entrust me with education, I will be too happy to render my services. We must find the strengths lying dormant within the country and employ them. We need a person who enjoys the confidence of the people. You do. A note of optimism. And the two parted. Soon after, Gandhi found his program. He marched to Dandi in March 1930, when Tagore had already left for Europe. Gandhi never returned to Ahmedabad, and Tagore did not visit the city again. In Germany, Tagore saw the Passion Play, based on the last days of the Christ's life. Almost overnight, he wrote a poem directly in English and called it The Child. I'm going to take a little detour of a minute to tell you that the Passion Play in Germany is in a village in Bavaria. It's performed once in 10 years. People from all over the world come to see the play, and only the residents of the village can take part in it. Nobody else is allowed to take part in it. And 2020 is the year of the Passion Play. It's in a village called Oberamago, southern Bavaria. It was late 1930. And Gandhi had declined an invitation to the first round table conference. It was a principled decision, as his conditions had not been accepted. It was more than just a principled decision. Gandhi had seen through what others had not. The British agenda was to create separate electorates in India based on religious identities, which would also have geographical separations. Thus, Bengal would be divided into an eastern sector with a Muslim majority, while the western sector would have a Hindu majority. Tagore recognized this as short-sighted and politically motivated with a grave long-term consequences. On the other hand, Baba Sahib Ambedkar saw the agenda as an opportunity for the lowest castes of Hindus, the Harijans, the Dalits, as Gandhi called them, the Harijans, to assert themselves and seek a separate electorate for themselves. The Harijans were not Hindus, he argued, as the Hindu majority had never accepted them as their own. Naturally, Gandhi was fiercely opposed to the idea. He threatened a nationwide agitation and go on an indefinite fast. In September 1932, Gandhi was imprisoned without a trial in Pune. Tagore was very much in the thoughts of Gandhi, even in prison. Dear Gurudev, it is the early morning, at 3 o'clock of Tuesday, I enter the fiery gate at noon. If you can bless the effort, I want it. You've been to me a true friend because you've been a candid friend, often speaking your thoughts aloud. I had looked forward to a firm opinion from you one way or the other, but you have refused to criticize. Though I know it can only be during the fast, I will yet prize your criticism if your heart condemns my action. I'm not so proud to make an open confession of my blunder, whatever the cost of confession. If I find myself in error, if your heart approves of the action, I want your blessings. It will sustain me. I hope I've made myself clear. Within a few days, there was a deterioration in Gandhi's health. Greatly concerned, Tagore left for Pune to be by his side, a journey of over 4 days. He wrote a long essay on the entire journey and the circumstances leading to Gandhi breaking his fast. We should go directly to the end of the essay. The play has a very poignant scene of Gandhi narrating that journey, his experience of the journey. But the end of the essay, when he meets Gandhi, he sees such determination in the frailty. The man is dying, but he hasn't given up one iota of this determination. Tagore is moved. I could hardly have fully realized how great is the strength of this frail man had I not come near to him like this. Today, to millions of hearts in India, has reached the message of his immortal spirit resting under the shadow of death's altar. In groups, men and women, clad in white khadda, quietly had discussions. Noticeable was the disciplined calm of this gathering inside the jail. At last, with the government's red sealed envelope in hand, appeared the Inspector General of Prisons. After he had finished reading, Gandhiji called his friends to discuss the communication. One understood that he did not go against Gandhi's wishes. The great penance of the fast was now over. The lemon juice was prepared by Srimati Kamala Nehru. According to the request of the Inspector General of Prisons, it was to be given to Mahatma Ji by Srimati Kasturibai. Mahadev told me that my Gitanjali song, when the heart is dried and parched up, was a favorite of Gandhiji's. I had forgotten the tune which once I gave it. I sang it to an improvised tune. Pandit Shyam Sastri read out from the Vedas. Srimati Kasturbai handed to Mahatma Ji the glass of fruit juice which he took and slowly sipped. Then the members of Sabarmati Ashram and others sang in chorus the hymn Vaishnava Jan. Within jail barricades, this great festival of peace took place. Never had happened such an event in human history. A sacrificial yagna was begun inside the prison and it reached its great fulfillment. A period of intense anxiety for all ended on a peaceful note. Gandhi remarked later, Gurudev, did you know that by singing your song on that day, you were setting a precedence? Subsequently, that song was sung whenever I broke my fast. Gandhi was so moved by the love showered by the poet, he wrote to Charlie Andrews, Gurudev is still at it. That little fast brought me many treasures. Gurudev was the richest find. If somebody had said, fast to find Gurudev, I should have done it without a second thought. I was dying to find a corner in his heart. Thank God I found it through the fast. In the wake of the great earthquake in 1934 in Bihar, Tagore was compelled to write to Gandhi again. The press reports that you, in a recent speech, referring to the recent earthquake in Bihar, spoke as follows. I want you to be superstitious enough to believe with me that the earthquake is a divine chastisement for the great sin we have committed against those whom we describe as Harijans. I find it difficult to believe this. But if this be your real view of the matter, I do not think it should go unchallenged. Herewith, you will find a rejoinder from me. If you are correctly reported in the press, would you kindly send it to the press as a rejoinder? Mahatma Ji was gracious to publish the rejoinder in the Harijan. It has caused me painful surprise to find Mahatma Gandhi accusing those who blindly follow their social custom of untouchability of having brought down God's vengeance upon certain parts of Bihar, evidently specially selected by God for his desolating displeasure. It is all the more unfortunate for this kind of unscientific view of things is too readily accepted by a large section of our countrymen. I am compelled to utter a truism in asserting that physical catastrophes have their inevitable origin in a combination of physical facts. The bard of Shantiniketan is Gurudev for me, as he is for the residents of that great institution. But Gurudev and I early discovered certain differences. And it cannot suffer by Gurudev's latest utterance on my linking the Bihar calamity with the sin of untouchability. He had a perfect right to utter his protest when he believed that I was in error. My profound regard for him would make me listen to him more readily than to any other critic. But in spite of my having read his statement 3 times, I must adhere to what I've written in these columns. We do not know the laws of God, nor their working. Visitations like droughts, floods, earthquakes, and the like, though they seem to have only physical origins, are for me somehow connected with man's morals. And that was that. As he put it, the subject of God's will was in the realm of faith and had no need for debate. On September 10, 1937, the poet was suddenly taken ill. He had been in Kolkata, and when he returned to Shantiniketan at night, he fell unconscious. As the telegraph office was then closed, the staff at the railway office sent a telephonic message to Kolkata at 1 o'clock at night, asking that doctors should be sent to Shantiniketan immediately. Dr. Sir Neil Ratan Sarkar left for Shantiniketan at 2 in the morning and reached there by dawn. Tagore was completely unconscious for 62 hours, and all hopes were given up. But he did regain consciousness, and once he did, the recovery was rapid. When he was told about an anxious message from Gandhi inquiring about his health, he responded immediately, "Dear Mahatma ji, the first thing that welcomed me into the world of life after the period of stupor I passed through was your message of affectionate anxiety, and it was worth fully the cost of suffering. With grateful love." Between 1938 and 1939, Tagore paid glorious tributes to Gandhi. And it's quite voluminous. I'm going to read just a few extracts. An ascetic himself, he does not frown upon the joys of others, but works for enlivening their existence day and night. He exalts poverty in his own life, but no man has striven more assiduously than he for the material welfare of his people. A reformer with the zeal of a revolutionary, he imposes severe restraints on the very passions he provokes. He advises his followers to hate evil without hating the evildoer. It sounds an impossible precept, but he has made it as true as it can be made in his own life. Great as he is, as an organizer, as a leader of men, as a moral reformer, he's greater than all of these as a man. Because none of these aspects and activities limit his humanity. Though an incorrigible idealist and given to referring all conduct to certain pet formulae of his own, he is essentially a lover of man and not of mere ideas. If he proposes an experiment for society, he must first subject himself to its ordeals. If he calls for a sacrifice, he must first pay its price himself. This man seems greater than his virtues, great as they are. A moving tribute, wholly authentic, and finally an admission. I should confess that I do not always see eye to eye with the Mahatma, by which I mean that had I been endowed with his force of character, my scheme of work would have been different. However, though I may have the imagination to conceive, I have not the power to carry out. Only a few men in the world have this power. And since our country has had the good fortune of giving birth to such a man, the way should be kept clear for his progress. I certainly would never think of impeding it. In 1940, Gandhi visited Tagore in Shantiniketan. As Gandhi was taking his leave, Tagore handed him a letter. Among other things, it sought Gandhi's interest in Vishwabharati. And now, before you take your leave from Shantiniketan, I make my fervent appeal to you. Accept this institution under your protection, giving it an assurance of permanence. If you consider it to be a national asset, Vishwabharati is like a vessel which is carrying the cargo of my life's best treasure. And I hope it may claim a special care for my countrymen for its preservation. You may depend upon my doing all I can in the common endeavor to assure its permanence. I look to you to keep your promise, to sleep religiously for about 1 hour daily during the day. Though I have always regarded Shantiniketan as my second home, this visit has brought me nearer to it than ever before. As early as the January of 1929, Mira Madeline Slade, a disciple of Gandhiji, had written to Tagore after returning from Shantiniketan. I now realize how Shantiniketan and Sabarmati are two fair daughters of the same great motherland, both with exquisite beauties of their own, different to look upon outwardly, and yet with that fundamental likeness which only daughters of the same parent can bear. Tagore had replied in his inimitable style, human life has its two aspects. One is the discipline of truth, and the other is the fullness of expression. Sabarmati represents that discipline of truth. For Mahatma Ji is born with the pure fire of truth. His nature is one with it. Being a poet, my mission is to inspire life's fullness of expression. And I hope Shantiniketan carries out that ideal in all its activities. According to the Upanishad, the reconciliation of the contradiction between tapasya and ananda is at the root of creation. Mahatma Ji is the prophet of tapasya. I am the poet of Ananda. In 1941, Tagore turned 80. The World War was already into its second year. Third year. At a reception organized to celebrate the landmark birthday, his essay on the crisis in civilization was read out on his behalf. Tagore was not in a condition to speak. An excerpt from that essay. The wheels of fate will one day compel the English to give up their Indian empire. But what kind of India will they leave behind? What stark misery? When the stream of their administration of centuries runs dry at last, what a waste of mud and filth will they leave behind them? I had at one time believed that the springs of civilization would issue out of the heart of Europe. But today, when I'm about to quit the world, that faith has gone bankrupt altogether. And yet, I shall not commit the grievous sin of losing faith in man. A greeting by telegram from Gandhi arrived. 80, not enough. May you finish 5. Thanks, message. But 80 is impertinence, 50 intolerable. Did either of them know that this would be the final communication exchanged? Tagore breathed his last on August 7, 1941. I think we can do this on the floor. We don't have to go up. जरा मदद कीजिए.
Vijay, that was absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
You
sir.
made both Gandhiji and Tagore come alive in our midst this evening. And as I sit down to begin this conversation with you, and so many of us who've been listening to this, I'm sure, have a lot to reflect on and also perhaps raise with you some thoughts that come up. So let me begin. There was so much disagreement that Tagore and Gandhi had with each other in their approach to what would be purposeful ways of societal engagement. The dialogue, of course, brings out these differences, and it also brings out the nature of attachment, love, respect, dignity that the two were able to accord to each other. But underneath these differences, let me first ask you, what are the areas where you think they actually agreed and had agreements rather than differences? There must be a very large canvas of commonalities where they did not have differences. So would you care to say something about these areas where they actually concurred with each other?
Certainly. Let me give you, let me give you the backdrop, the background to this play. It is important to be able to respond to that question. This play is one in a series called The History of Ideas. We've done 18 plays. It's a long-term program. The plays are a combination of biography and historical context. What is it about that time which precipitated something great? What was it about that time that made Newton think on certain lines? What was it about that time that made Galileo want to explain what he saw through a telescope? So there's always, great ideas are not always, but often products of their time. So our play series tries to highlight context. In the year 2013, this country celebrated 150 years of Swami Vivekananda. The Ministry of Culture had by then got to know about our History of Ideas program, and they were very keen that we should write a fresh play on Vivekananda. It's difficult to say no to the Ministry of Culture. We explained how we view this program. It's not going to be hagiographic. It's not going to be a promotion of Hinduism. We would like to look at Vivekananda as a human being who wanted to serve. They said, just fine, just go ahead. And then we had a team of 4 people working for 6 months doing the research. And you know what? Once again, we saw the product of its time. You have to look at Vivekananda's work as part of the Bengal Renaissance. Jagdish Chandra Bose as part of the Bengal Renaissance. Without that, it doesn't make sense to pluck it out of a historical context. So what I'm trying to get at is, what was the historical context here? No matter what you believed in, what held you together was to get the British out. Tagore was as much a part of the freedom movement as anybody else. But he was not interested in the political party mainstream. He brought intellect into the movement. He constantly wanted people to rise above petty movements into what is the vision of the India that you have created. That projection that we had ends with his famous poem about the sort of country we want, where the mind is without fear. Now, so if you look at what in the jargon we'd call the superordinate vision, they were both compatible with that. Mm. But in the operational details, they differed. So when we first saw the material, by the way, it's based on the seminal work of Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, who was the Vice Chancellor of Vishwabharati. Amazing piece of archival work. And Shailesh Parekh of Ahmedabad thought it would look good on stage. And so the concept of a play was his. And he shared the idea with us in the manuscript. And we said, yes, it'll make a good play. But it needed a lot of reworking. To make it stage-worthy, you need to do other things with the idea. So that's how in the actual play we strengthened it by having a very powerful narrator, what I was doing from the center, right? And we focused on one thing. There are lots of things, there are lots of exchanges. If you look at Sabyasachi's work, it's a very broad canvas. But we said, what is it that we should work on today in India? We said, let's work on reminding ourselves of the political maturity that this country had, which we've lost. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? How they could have such genuine love, respect. So, when it was known that he's going to die, the one person he wanted to see was Tagore. To be by his side when he breaks his fast, if he breaks his fast. And he takes that journey of 4 days to be by his side. I'm just going to add one more piece, and then I'm going to give it back to you, hoping I've addressed your question. This play has been produced twice in the United States in the same year. They had the budget to have me over. And I was a bit curious, what will this play mean to an American audience? And you know what? They said, this is as relevant for us. We've lost our political maturity. It's not that, what it was at the time of Jefferson and others. So it's very relevant. And one was a university audience, so you can imagine that they could relate to it. But one was a general public audience in Texas. They loved it. So there's something about this play which rises above operational differences. When we started on the play, we never imagined that we would do over 100 shows. We thought it was a good studio experiment. But people want it. We keep getting invitations, even today, and we are surprised.
Both of them, Tagore and Gandhiji,
Sorry?
both Tagore and Gandhiji are known by their iconic songs. Tagore is the composer of two national anthems, two countries, India and Bangladesh. Gandhiji is known for Vaishnav Jan and so many other hymns that he's associated with. So it's not as if Gandhiji didn't have an aesthetic aspect to his being. Tagore also did have an aesthetic aspect. But people have tended to think of Janagana Mana as having been written with a different purpose. And therefore, this idea that both of them were in the freedom movement to get the British out is something that many people would not agree on. Because if Tagore was composing songs to adulate King George, which later get transposed as the national anthem, then that's not really a position taken against the British.
Good point. Wherever we have performed, except Calcutta, and you'll understand why I say except Calcutta, in every audience without exception, it's been an eye-opener for the audience about Tagore. Tagore is known simply as the author of the national anthem. They don't see other sides of Tagore. Right? Tagore as a musician, Tagore as as an artist, Tagore as Upanishads. So this has been an eye-opener for people, that he had such profound thinking and ahead of his time. Only by educating their children together, right? With 2 to 3 generations. I mean, he was so far ahead of his time. And all of that we're dismantling today. Our idea of education today is segregation and not integration. We're actually dismantling it. So there's an aspect of Tagore that's not fully understood. And it's sad the country doesn't see Tagore as the extremely well-rounded, full person that he was. He's our Leonardo da Vinci. Nothing less. Now, likewise, we have stereotyped ideas about Gandhi. Unfortunately. Anybody who's interested in Gandhi should begin with his autobiography. When he himself talks about the major influences in his life, in shaping his philosophy of life, Leo Tolstoy, John Ruskin, Henry David Thoreau. Environmentalism came to him from Henry David Thoreau. And Christ. There's not one Hindu spiritual leader here in shaping his early thoughts. But he was a firm Hindu. He was sure that his roots were there. But his understanding of things beyond his Hindu faith came from there. We don't see this side of him. We tend to put him into very stereotyped ideas of, being adamant, being stubborn, and so on. There's much more to Gandhi than that.
I think it's also remarkable that both of them came up with ideas in education. Tagore came up with this amazing book, which is unfortunately only available in Bengali, called Shikha. It's never been translated into English. And Gandhiji also came up with his idea of what should be the curriculum. Both of them had, but that's something that I think also at the back of this correspondence, as you just pointed out, they were both erudite scholars in one sense, and experientially, aesthetically inclined in another. And I would say that even that is an area where they present some common aspects.
Yeah. Now, here's a little tidbit you may or may not know. Tagore's family lands were in what's now Bangladesh. It was East Bengal, Shilaida district. And one of the tributaries of the Ganga, called the Padma River, Poddo in Bengali, is where he would be writing his poetry. We were invited to perform in Bangladesh. Indo-Bangla, joint celebration of Tagore. And the Bangladeshis are very skeptical. Because for them, Tagore is God. For them, Tagore is theirs. They claim Tagore is theirs. India doesn't deserve Tagore. Okay? So they're very skeptical. Who are these people coming to tell us about Tagore's life? But when they saw the play, they loved us. We got the best fish meal after that we've ever had. They just loved us. Now, there's something more significant about this. Because in the conversation, they refer to Tagore as God. It struck us as odd. Here's an Islamic nation. Is this blasphemous that they're referring to a human being as God? They said, no. that does not mean that we are less Islamic. And then they explained to us how Bangladesh was created. They said when it was East Pakistan and West Pakistan was trying to impose a Punjabi culture, an Urdu culture, they said our ethnic identity of being Bengali was more important than our Islamic identity. We are Bengalis first. Amazing. So, the precipitating factor that led to the revolution and, the 1971 war. On Baishak Day, they were going to gather in a Maidan for a joint protest, singing from sunrise to sunset. It was almost Tiananmen Square. The army was deployed to shoot. But the army had Bangladeshis. So they didn't know how to pull the trigger. It was almost that. What did they sing? They sang Rabindra Sangeet. So you see now how much Tagore means to them, the East Bengal identity. And how concerned Tagore was about the fabric of Bengal identity being torn apart by the British. Yeah?
I've had the privilege of having been through the entire performance of The Poet and the Prophet. Today we've had an abridged version. I think at some point I hope that all of us can experience the full version with all its actors. And I think, but as a single person doing all the roles, it's been simply remarkable that you've been able to carry three characters all together.
I want to take 2 minutes to address a question that Vivek asked at the start of. This is nationalism. It didn't come out in the abridged version that I did, but it's an important segment in the main play. And actually, today's audiences in India should be exposed to that. Tagore was vociferously against narrow nationalism. He made a distinction between patriotism and love for your country and nationalism, which makes everything else wrong. How did he arrive at this discomfort with nationalism? And this is a story worth recalling. Tagore was a hero in his lecture tour in the United States because his message was pacifism. And he was a poet. He had a wonderful way with words. And he was a lovable character with his great robe and long hair and all that. He was an absolute hit. He was a rock star in the US trip. Woodrow Wilson was standing for elections. And he decided to ride the pacifism wave. And he chose, and he was very shrewd. He used the Tagore lectures to say, America will never enter somebody else's war. And in an indirect way, Tagore's work endorsed his presidentship. He won. Within months, America joined the war. And Tagore was so disillusioned and so angry that it doubled his anger against nationalism. It's a historical fact.
Yeah. But in fact, there are three dimensions to how Tagore's feelings about nationalism evolved, and he's encapsulated them into three different essays. The first one being about...
Yeah. We don't deal with that in detail in the play, but it's well known. It's very well known. Yeah. I think we're at the end of the evening, right? So I want to thank you for coming. I didn't expect such a large number. And I want to thank AMA once again for their hospitality. It was a lovely opportunity. This one-person presentation, I do when I travel, but you should see the main play. Thank you, and good night. And thank you, Ajit.
Thank you very much, sir. It is indeed a pleasure for us to listen you and playing all three roles. I think the small audience, so it's fine. We are very, very thankful to him for bringing this whole presentation here. Single person, three roles, and I'm sure now we are looking forward for the main play very soon. Thank you very much, sir. And on behalf of AMA, I would like to present. Prof. Thank you very much for your very nice